The procession on the mountain road. On the dead as a pressure. A herdsman watched his flock by night on a mountain road. He had been a herdsman for 40 years. He had inherited the work from his father, who had inherited it from his grandfather. The work was, in his family, very old. He moved his flock in the long summers between the high pastures of the mountains and the lower pastures of the foothills. He moved them in the winters to the sheltered valleys further south. He had walked, in his 40 years, more miles with his sheep than any other man of his village. He knew the mountain road well. It was a narrow stone road that ran along the spine of a particular ridge for some 12 miles. It had been built in some unknown century by men whose work had been more careful than the work of the men who came after them. The stones were perfectly cut, perfectly fitted, polished by countless feet, and the road had survived the storms and the slides and the long winters in good condition. The herdsman used the road every spring and every autumn when he moved the flock between pastures. He was, that particular autumn, returning the flock from the high pastures to the foothills. The journey took 5 days. The road, at the highest part of its passage, crossed the spine of the ridge in a wide bare section. The herdsman had, on the 3rd night of his journey, made his camp at this section. He had built a small fire of pine branches. The sheep slept around it. He sat on a flat stone beside the fire with his shepherd's stick across his knees. It was a clear winter, and the stars were sharp. This was, by his memory, the brightest night of the year. The moon had not yet risen. The sky was so dense with stars that they were not, in places, individually distinguishable. They merged into a soft glow that lit the mountain road faintly, even without the fire. He had been a herdsman for 40 years and was not afraid of any night. He had seen, in his 40 years, every kind of weather and every kind of wildlife. He had been charged by a bear in his 23rd year and had survived. He had been caught in a snowstorm in his 31st year and had survived. He had, in his 38th year, been bitten by a snake whose bite he had not known to be dangerous, and had survived because his wife, on his return home, had known the herb. He was, in his 60th year, the kind of man who did not easily frighten. He saw in the 2nd hour after midnight a long procession coming down the road. He saw it first as a grey line far up the road, perhaps a mile away. He had been dozing. He had opened his eyes to add a branch to the fire, and he had looked up the road, and he had seen the line. The line, on closer inspection, was a procession of figures. It was grey, it was silent, it was longer than any procession he had ever seen. He stood up. He moved a little away from the fire so that his eyes would not be dazzled. He looked up the road carefully. There were more people in the procession than there were people in any of the cities he had ever heard of. The procession went, as far as he could see, up the road and over the spine and out of sight on the far side. He estimated, very roughly, that the visible portion alone contained perhaps 10,000 figures. The unseen portion, on the far side of the spine, might have contained any number. They walked in a strange, even step. It was a step that was perfectly synchronized across the whole procession. He could see, from his distance, the rows of figures moving as one, the foot of each row landing at the same moment, the heads of each row bobbing in the same rhythm. It was not the marching of an army. It was something more uniform than that, more inhuman. It was the walking of a body, a great body composed of small bodies, all moving according to the same internal pulse. They did not look at the fire. They did not look at the sheep. They did not look at him. He had assumed in his first seeing that they would look. People walking on a mountain road in the 2nd hour after midnight do, in his experience, look at a shepherd's fire. The procession did not. The procession walked, with its perfectly even step, with its faces all set in the same direction, without acknowledging anything beside the road. The herdsman stood up fully. He moved toward the road. He stopped perhaps 10 feet from it at the edge of his small camp. He watched as the first figures came past. They were of all kinds, old men, young men, women, children, infants carried by their mothers. They were dressed in clothes the herdsman could not place. Some wore clothes of his own century, some wore clothes that looked very old indeed. Some wore clothes that did not seem to be of any century he could identify. They were all of them grey. This was the strangest part. They were not grey in the way that ordinary people are grey by moonlight. The moon had not risen, there was no light source that could have made them grey. They were grey in their own substance. They had been somehow drained of colour. Their clothes were grey, their faces were grey, their hair was grey. They were a slightly luminous grey in the dark, as if they carried their own faint light with them. He took a deep breath. "Who are you?" he called. His voice sounded, to his own ears, surprisingly steady. He had not in his 40 years been afraid of any night. He was not that night afraid either. He was in some way only attentive. The procession did not stop, but in one voice every member of it answered him at once. The voice was a single voice. It was made of perhaps 10,000 voices, but they spoke as one, with no separation in their timing. The combined voice was deep and quiet and gentle. It did not carry, in its quietness, very far. It was directed precisely at him in his small camp, and was not even at his distance loud. "We are everyone who died with a question we could not put down," they said. "We are passing through your watch. We need someone to listen. If no one listens, we will pass through again. We have passed through this mountain 7,000 times." The herdsman sat down on the edge of the road. "What question?" he said. The combined voice answered. "They are different questions," it said. "Each of us in our own life was working on a different question. Some of us were working on small questions, questions about the small failures of love in our marriages, questions about the meaning of our work, questions about the conduct of our children. Some of us were working on larger questions, questions about the existence of God, about the structure of the universe, about the purpose of suffering. But they are all the same kind of question. They are the questions that did not get asked in life. They are the questions our families would not let us ask. They are the questions our priests said had been answered when they had not been answered. They are the questions our work did not have time for. They are the questions we, on our deathbeds, found we had been wanting to ask, but had run out of time. We carried them into the ground. The ground does not absorb questions," said the voice. "The questions float. They cannot, by their nature, decay. They cannot, by their nature, settle. They float in a particular layer of the air, the layer just above the ground, just below the sky, and they accumulate. We are in some sense the questions ourselves. We have become our questions. We walk because we cannot, until the questions are received, lie down. How do you receive a question? Someone has to listen. The listening is not, in any precise sense, an active hearing. The listener does not have to understand the question. The listener does not have to answer it. The listener only has to be present, with attention, while the question is spoken into a fire. The fire takes the question into its smoke. The smoke takes the question to the stars. The stars know what to do with the questions. The stars have, in their long custom, been receiving questions for as long as there have been questions. The stars are the field where the questions, in time, are resolved. Why have you not been received before? Most night watchmen sleep. The few who are awake, in the hour of our passing, do not see us. The procession is, in some way, visible only to a watchman who is in the right state, attentive, patient, not afraid, not eager to be helpful. The state is rare. We have passed through this mountain 7,000 times. We have been seen, by my count, perhaps 40 times. Each of those 40 seeings has been a small relief for some portion of the procession. Perhaps 1,000 of us in each seeing have spoken our questions into the fire and have been released. "You alone are not enough," said the voice, "but you will do for tonight. We will speak our questions to your fire. The fire will speak them to its smoke. The smoke will speak them to the stars. The stars know what to do with them. It will take a few hours." The herdsman sat down by the fire. "I will listen," he said. The procession began to speak. The speaking was not loud. It was, in fact, very quiet, a low murmur, just at the edge of the herdsman's hearing. Each figure in the procession, as it passed the fire, spoke its question. The speaking, in each case, took only a few seconds. The figure spoke, the fire crackled and accepted the question into its smoke, and the figure walked on, slightly less grey than it had been, slightly more relieved in its bearing. The herdsman did not, in his listening, understand the questions. They were in many languages. They were in languages he knew, they were in languages he did not. They were also, in some cases, in no language at all. They were spoken in sounds that were not, by any conventional measure, words. He did not need to understand them. The listening, the procession had said, did not require understanding. He sat by the fire until dawn. The procession passed slowly all night. The fire burned without his feeding it. He had brought on the third night of his journey only enough wood for a normal evening's fire. The wood had run out around midnight, but the fire continued. The smoke continued to rise. The smoke continued to take into itself the questions that were being spoken into it. By morning, the procession had finished passing. The last figures had been, in the herdsman's observation, less grey than the first. They had walked a little more lightly. They had, in some sense, been preparing themselves for whatever lay on the far side of the spine. The procession had crossed the spine and had gone on. The fire died down. The dawn came up over the eastern peaks. The sheep, who had slept undisturbed, began to stir. He was a different man. He could not, on inspection, have said how. He was the same herdsman he had been before the second hour after midnight. He had his stick. He had his flock. He had his 5-day journey to complete. But he was, in some inner register, different. He had been for some hours the place where 10,000 or more dead had spoken their questions. The dead had passed through him. He had been the small bridge by which they had reached the stars. He gathered the flock. He continued that morning down the road. He completed the journey to the foothills. He did not, on his return to the village, tell anyone about the procession. He understood somehow that the telling would have made it less real. He kept it to himself. But for the rest of his life, when he watched his flock by night, he stayed awake. He stayed awake on every night he camped on the spine of the mountain. He stayed awake on the nights in other places when he had a sense that the procession might be passing. He had developed, after the first encounter, a small instinct for it, a kind of pressure in his chest, a slight tightening that he had come to recognize as the procession's approach. The procession came again, in his lifetime, twice. It came when he was 68. It came when he was 73. Each time he was ready. He sat by his fire. He listened. The procession spoke its questions into his smoke. The smoke spoke them to the stars. By each morning he was a slightly different man. He died at 75 in his own bed. His son, who had also been a herdsman, inherited the route. He had not, in his own watching, ever seen the procession. He did not, in his own life, see it. He had not, somehow, been in the right state at the right times. The procession had passed through his nights without showing itself to him. He had slept through. This was, in the herdsman's family, the pattern. The procession showed itself to some watchers and not to others. The showing was not, in any obvious way, a reward. The not showing was not a punishment. It was simply that the procession, in passing, was visible to a particular state of attention, and the state was rare. The procession is, in some province, still passing. It is, by now, perhaps 10,000 passings further than the 7,000 it had reported. The stars, in some province, are still receiving. The dead have questions they could not put down. They walk with them. They wait for someone to listen. The work of the night watchman is also to listen. The fire takes the question into its smoke. The smoke takes it to the stars. The stars know what to do with the questions. You do not need to. The procession is, in passing, visible only to the watchman in the right state, attentive, patient, not afraid, not eager to be helpful. The state is rare. The few who hold it see. The many who do not sleep through. The work continues. In either case,